Godzilla. You know him, you love him. The indestructible fire-breathing dinosaur with a penchant for knocking over Tokyo's most iconic landmarks. Godzilla is a decades-long enduring character. The franchise has over 35 movies, plus a huge variety of spin-off media. He is a legend, to put it simply. If you ask anyone to name a movie monster, odds are Godzilla will be the answer. But every legend has a beginning, and Godzilla is no different. If you can believe it, his beginnings are quite humble. The awesome force that is the king of the monsters was born from the trauma of a populace, as well as a need to cut corners and save money. Trust me when I say that there is a powerful beating heart at the core of this movie. The origins of Godzilla are something special, something dark and hard to watch, but also something powerful and beautiful. I know I sound like I am speaking with hyperbole, but I promise I am not. While the Godzilla franchise does get rather campy rather quickly, the very first movie, Gojira, is a classic for a reason and worth studying even today. And I want to talk about it. I love this movie quite a bit, so be prepared for an endless effusion of praise. But if you can endure that, I will also be talking about the actual meat of the thing, because there is a lot of meat, I promise. So if you're ready, let's get started by breaking down the plot and events of the film. The actual plot events of Gojira are pretty straightforward. This is a disaster movie, after all, not a spy thriller or a heist movie, so things happen in a rather followable way. The real meat of this movie comes from the characters, setting, and atmosphere. It all starts with a ship at sea. You get this cozy little moment of the crew just working and existing, and then everything explodes. No joke, everything goes up in a sudden flash of white light with no warning for any of them. Another boat is sent to try and figure out what happened. We see this one suffer the same fate, bursting into flames after a white flash and sinking below the water in mere moments. And from there, it just escalates. A third boat is sunk off-screen, and a line of dialogue later in the movie indicates the number of sunken boats eventually hits over 17. Naturally, people begin to get worried. Experts are brought in, discussions had, etc. If you've seen 1950s monster movies before, you will know that they all feature scenes of scientists expositing what's going on. Gojira is no different. But it does these scenes pretty well overall. They're short enough, still informative, and they actually try to make sense. They aren't just hand-waving the sci part of sci-fi. Back to the actual movie now, and a group is sent to investigate. They make camp on a small local island, Odo Island. The natives there perform a ritual that aims to placate their ancient sea god, Godzilla. Yeah, it turns out that Godzilla has been around for long enough already to become a local legend. He isn't exactly new in town. That night, as everyone is bunkered down enduring a storm, Godzilla comes ashore. The movie does a great job of not showing him at all yet. You just see the effects. Buildings collapsing, people cowering in fear, all that. The build-up of Godzilla is a masterclass on how to keep things suspenseful without giving anything away. The next morning, as people are moving to a high point of the island, Godzilla actually appears. In one of the most iconic scenes of the franchise, Godzilla peeks his head over a hill, gives a roar, and everyone runs away. Then, Godzilla turns around and just leaves. After he is actually gone, the investigation continues, and the nasty truth is found. Godzilla is highly radioactive. Naturally, the existence of an angry radioactive gigantic monster worries the people of Japan, and they begin trying to stop him. The Coast Guard attacks Godzilla with depth charges, but this does nothing. He comes ashore on the mainland briefly, but doesn't stick around for too long yet. Japan builds a perimeter barrier around the coast, massive power towers with electrical cables, capable of delivering deadly voltages. Soon enough, one night Godzilla comes back ashore, and they get to test it out. Of course, the electricity does nothing, and Godzilla goes on a destruction tour of Tokyo. He utterly just lays waste to everything, and anything Japan tries to counter him is of no effect. He breaks buildings, smashes the tanks, and burns the city down. It's only the arrival of air forces that eventually drive Godzilla away. The actual climax of the movie is entirely a human affair. Desperate for any answer, the people of Japan turn to an unknown experimental technology. Dr. Serizawa, a brilliant scientist and war veteran, had accidentally discovered a compound that destroys oxygen molecules. He aptly named it the Oxygen Destroyer. Serizawa does not want to use the Oxygen Destroyer. He didn't even want to reveal its discovery. But due to the destruction, there is really no other choice. So Serizawa and another character, Ogata, dive down into Tokyo Bay, where Godzilla is napping. They release the Oxygen Destroyer, and it works. Godzilla is killed, being reduced to nothing but bones in a very short time. When Ogata and Serizawa are supposed to surface, Serizawa isn't there. He had cut the oxygen cord to his diving suit, ending his life to ensure no knowledge of the Oxygen Destroyer survives. And that's where the movie ends, right there. Godzilla is dead, Dr. Serizawa is dead, everyone alive is left horrified at what fresh hells they have just witnessed. In a final speech, a character, Dr. Yamane, gives a dire warning. Godzilla is likely not the last of this kind of horror. If we keep testing nukes, more monsters will appear. Yeah, this movie is not a happy one. Don't misunderstand me. This movie is magnificent, but it definitely is not cheery. So that's the plot summary, as straightforward as I can make it. I hope I didn't shrink so much of it that it sounds uninteresting, because again, this movie is really a masterclass of the genre. It's just that the genre plot of giant monster smash things is fairly linear. No, the real meat of this movie comes with the characters and the setting. So let's dive into them. If you noticed during my plot summary I didn't mention many names, that's because this movie doesn't really have one main character, so talking about the plot doesn't follow one single perspective. No, there's really 3 main characters, as well as supporting characters, and they're all important, because, well, you can't have a character drama without several characters playing off of each other. One of the first bigger characters we get introduced to is Dr. Yamane. He is a marine zoologist, and he was one of the people on the initial expedition to Odo Island. He is an important figure, spending most of the movie arguing against trying to kill Godzilla, and instead capture and study him. He isn't one of our main 3 characters, however. The first main character we meet is actually his daughter, Emiko, and her secret lover, Ogata. Well, I say secret, but it's more complicated than that. You see, Emiko is in an arranged marriage with our third main character, Dr. Serizawa himself. Yep, despite arriving on screen fairly late compared to Emiko and Ogata, Serizawa is arguably the mainest of our main characters. He actually has a character arc, more so than Emiko or Ogata. So yeah, the beating heart of Gojira is a romance drama, and I kind of love it for that. Emiko is arranged to marry Serizawa, but she is in love with Ogata, and it's kind of an open secret. People know, but nobody says anything. Emiko and Ogata are trying to find a way to formalize things. It's all very dramatic. But if you're worried this is sounding a bit too convoluted for a horror monster disaster movie, don't worry, it doesn't get too caught up in the drama for drama's sake. It's just human flavor, and it's very good at it. Okay, let's take an actual proper roll call real quick. First, Dr. Yamane, the marine zoologist who hates seeing Godzilla die. Yamane is a real one. I appreciate his ideals. My favorite moment of his is when a reporter asks him, "Do you know of anything that could harm Godzilla?" And Yamane flat out tells the guy, "Godzilla survived being nuked. What the hell do we have that can hurt him?" It's kind of funny just how blunt he is. There is no sugarcoating at all. Next up is Emiko Yamane. I like her, and her story is emotionally rich. Not just from the Ogata-Serizawa romance, but also because of the Oxygen Destroyer. You see, Serizawa told nobody about its existence, except her. And she made a promise to never tell. So poor Emiko is dealing firsthand with the devastation Godzilla brings, and she knows something that could help, but she's honor-bound to never reveal it. And when she finally does reveal it, you can tell just how much it affects her. And there's Ogata. Of the 3 main characters, he is the plainest, but not at all bad. He's a marine salvage worker and is working with the Coast Guard during Godzilla's initial attacks. He and Emiko wish to marry. The main hurdle is Ogata needing to ask formal permission from Dr. Yamane, and Emiko needs to break the news to Dr. Serizawa. Ogata is a fairly normal dude, but he hilariously has no chill. In one scene early on, when the research crew is leaving for Odo Island, initially Emiko is talking to him. She asks, "Do you think this will be fun?" And he says, "We could die at any moment." Like, wow, how reassuring. A bit later on, there's also the scene with Dr. Yamane. Ogata is supposed to be asking permission to marry Emiko, but it plays out like this. Yamane arrives home looking tired and sad. When asked what's wrong, he thinks it's bad that they're trying to kill Godzilla. Ogata just immediately disagrees, and not even with tact or subtlety, just flat out, "No, I disagree." Yamane gets rightfully angry and storms off. Again, Ogata was supposed to be schmoozing Yamane up to ask permission to marry Emiko. He has no chill. But you can't be too mad at Ogata. He clearly means well, and overall he's rather endearing. Finally, we have the most complicated character of the movie, Dr. Serizawa. Serizawa is presented even at the start as standoffish and haunted. His name is dropped a few times before we meet him, and when we finally see him, you can tell right off the bat he has seen some things. His whole arc is basically him not wanting to become the next Oppenheimer. He has discovered something powerful, something easily weaponized, and incredibly destructive. Naturally, this scared him a bit. He spends most of the movie denying the existence of the oxygen destroyer. And when he finally does reveal it, he immediately destroys all of his research, then later ends his own life to make sure nobody can ever use it again. Utterly tragic. So yeah, that's the real meat of this film, the inter-character drama and the oxygen destroyer as basically something that makes nukes look wimpy. I really do like how serious this feels, though. We see the oxygen destroyer used a few times in the movie, and it is indeed destructive, capable of turning bodies of water into wastelands within mere moments. And the people reacting to this all also feel very authentic. I very much buy Serizawa being haunted by the discovery, and Emiko being guilt-ridden by keeping it a secret, even when Godzilla is an active threat. Every character is portrayed really well, really elevating the stakes and setting. I didn't even talk about the minor characters like Shinji, and I should because there's meat there too, but this video is already going to be long as heck. There is also good thought put into the little details of everyone interacting. For example, at the climax of the film, when Serizawa and Ogata are diving down to use the oxygen destroyer, there's a brief shot where you can see that Serizawa is the one who tugs on Ogata's cord to signal the team to pull him up. Ogata didn't signal himself. Serizawa pulled a sneaky. It's very brief, and I admit I only noticed it after a few viewings. But there are bits like that all over. Mix that with the more in-your-face character moments, like Emiko and Serizawa have hard-to-watch emotional breakdowns at points. And you're left with a masterclass of setting the mood. The movie is set in modern, normal, post-war Japan in 1954. There is nothing outlandish or fantastical here, no special tech beyond the oxygen destroyer. That stuff wouldn't come for a couple of movies. Plus, with no other kaiju in the film, the main monster action is just a very one-sided Godzilla vs. Tokyo. There isn't any wow factor or spectacle here. The destruction is played straight up as a disaster. The escalation overall, from single ships blowing up, to Godzilla dismantling Odo Island, to his final campaign through Tokyo at night, is all extremely well realized. This is all done to service the overall tone, the bleak, depressing tone. I know I keep bringing it up, but only because I feel like I need to kind of warn casual viewers who haven't seen much Godzilla media. The popular stuff is usually just fun, kid-friendly, and not very deep. This movie is kind of the opposite of all of that, so if you're expecting another fun little campy affair, well, this ain't it. What it is, though, is rich. Yes, it's sad, but there's a depth and nuance to the sadness. It's bleakness with texture, emotion you can chew on and linger with. I mentioned before that Emiko and Serizawa have breakdowns during the film. There's also Yamane being sad and angry that Godzilla has to be killed. The characters are living through some truly harsh events, and the movie realizes that harshness well. The emotional toll felt by the characters gets emphasized several times. Beyond the core characters, there is further somber detail in the rest of the human side of things. Godzilla's big, destructive attack on Tokyo is shot in the dark, and mostly from the ground. This emphasizes Godzilla's size and helps present him as a disaster instead of the hero kaiju he's usually known to be. The aftermath scenes are presented as the main point of things, instead of celebrating destruction like the kaiju genre does in most cases. You have all these scenes that linger on the ruins during the aftermath. And how during the actual rampage, it is presented in silence. There's no music, just the sounds of buildings burning and people screaming. If the atmospheric scenes of rubble didn't do enough for you, we have the really harsh bits, the scenes that cover the human cost. These scenes stand out to me each time I watch the movie. The scene of this woman comforting her children as a building collapses onto them, the children's choir singing a prayer for peace, and my most least favorites, this kid in the hospital with a Geiger counter going off as he gets examined. Are you understanding why I felt the need to warn people now? This is some of the darkest stuff I have ever seen. It gets me much more than any shock horror. But that is the intent. After all, the movie is meant to be anti-war and anti-nuclear bomb, which, given the history, makes complete sense. Okay, getting now into the history. So right off the bat, let's address the obvious, the nukes. This movie came out in 1954, and the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had occurred only 9 years prior, in 1945. To say that those bombings influenced this movie is one hell of an understatement. The producer, Tomoyuki Tanaka, outright stated that the main theme of this film was the terror of the bomb, and the director, Ishiro Honda, had served in the military during active wartime. Multiple members of the cast and crew knew people who had died in these bombings. The whole film is entrenched with I'm not sure what to call it really, the cultural reckoning of the trauma from these bombs. We are now 80 years removed from World War II and the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Suffice to say, the cultural memory has certainly faded a bit. There are not many people left alive in the entire world who would have witnessed them. This film, made by people who felt this trauma firsthand, is just an amazing example of art being made from horror and trauma being used as a tool of reconciliation and exploration. It's a unique time capsule of some truly dark days. Okay, I think that's enough emphasis on the depressing for a bit. What's the actual history of the movie itself like then? Well, the earliest concept, as penned by Tanaka, took inspiration from the accident of the Lucky Dragon No. 5 fishing boat. The boat accidentally entered into a nuclear test site in the Bikini Atoll, causing radiation harm to several crew. He mixed that event with the veritable grandparents of all kaiju movies, King Kong and the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. King Kong, I'm sure I don't need to tell you about, like you don't know who Kong is, but his debut movie was in 1933. There is a small debate about whether Kong was the first kaiju or not. The other movie, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, was a 1953 American monster movie, notable for the effects by stop-motion master Ray Harryhausen. Kong and the Beast are the progenitors of the kaiju genre and are both well worth a watch in their own merits as well. The design of the Godzilla monster itself was based just on dinosaurs. Looking at it, you can pretty easily tell, but the main cited inspiration are T-Rex in general, with Stegosaurus dorsal plates, and then long iguanodon arms. They then decided to make the skin covered in radiation keloid scars to emphasize the nuclear. The name for it, Gojira, is a combination of Japanese words Gorira and Kujira, which are gorilla and whale. I get the whale part, being a gigantic marine animal, but I gotta say I am not seeing much gorilla in the big guy, which is good. We already have an ape monster with Kong. So the overall idea was basically, what if a monster movie, but the monster was stronger than the most powerful weapon we have ever seen? Thus, the kaiju film was truly birthed, and we are all better off for it. And yes, Gojira is widely considered to be the first true kaiju movie. The development of the film was done with a rather meager budget. The movie is filmed in black and white, despite color film existing. It's just that black and white was a lot cheaper. But this actually works in the film's favor. The black and white adds an extra layer of foreboding, especially during the big nighttime rampage through Tokyo. I definitely believe that filming this in what passed for color in 1954 would have made this movie a lot less memorable. There is a reason why they made a black and white version of Godzilla -1, and it's because sometimes colorless filming just looks better. In fact, a lot of the effects that I enjoy were designed out of budgetary constraints, so this seems like a good segue into them. Before the advent of CGI, if you wanted to show something fantastical, such as a monster leveling an entire city, you had to get really creative with it. No computer to render it for you. And hand-drawn animation at the time was quite expensive and time-consuming. Not to mention, making anything an animated cartoon immediately made people think it was for children. So drawing something serious like this was out of the question. It would have to be done practically, with things being actively destroyed in front of the cameras. If you remember, I mentioned the two monster movies that inspired Gojira, King Kong and The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Both of these movies featured scenes of a large creature climbing on or destroying buildings. In both of these films, the monsters were realized by the process of stop motion. Masters of the genre, Willis O'Brien and Ray Harryhausen, would spend painstaking hours moving models of the creature and city, taking a still image and going frame by frame to create the motion of the monsters. Originally, Toho was looking to use stop motion as well for Gojira. The effects overseer, Eiji Tsuburaya, was a big fan of both O'Brien and Harryhausen. However, stop motion was decided against due to budget and, more importantly, time and skill. Toho didn't have anyone with the level of skill of O'Brien or Harryhausen, and Tsuburaya estimated to make Godzilla using stop motion would take 7 entire years. Needless to say, 7 years was far too long, and so another solution needed to be devised. The solution they came up with: make a bigger small-scale city and destroy it, using a person in a costume instead of a stop-motion figure. If you can believe it, this had never been done before. I'm not kidding. Gojira was the movie that invented suitmation. So for anyone out there who loves Power Rangers, you can thank this movie for inventing the genre. The oddest thing about this is that making a bigger version of the city actually turned out to be cheaper than scaling it all the way down to figure scale. The city was made at 1/25th scale to proper Tokyo. The scale for a time-lapse approach would have been closer to 1/50th or even 1/100th. Due to this larger scale, the fake buildings could be made out of cheaper, easily breakable materials like plywood and plaster, also making them more crumbleable on camera. The destruction scenes also benefited from this approach. For a time-lapse, a building coming down, the animators would need to move the pieces and everything, every frame. But for suitmation, you can just turn the camera on and have the guy in the costume flail around for a bit. It made everything faster to build, faster to film, and it was easier to have realistic, detailed destruction debris. The biggest change overall was the physics. I love time-lapse as a medium, but it certainly has a specific look that is just a little bit floaty, since each of the 24 frames every second have to be moved by hand. With the suitmation, they instead used overcranking, filming at much higher than 24 frames every second. Then they just played the scene back at the standard 24 frames per second, giving everything slowness and weight. Sort of the opposite effect from time-lapse. Let's talk about the Godzilla suit then. Now, given that this was the first time anyone had done this style of monster movie before, you probably will not be surprised to hear that the first attempt was not the best. The first Godzilla suit was made with heavy rubber over metal and bamboo frame, and it was basically unusable. The main issue was that it was just utterly inflexible, and it weighed a ton. It weighed over 100 kilos. or over 220 pounds for the Americans watching. It was so bad that during the test run of it, the actor inside the suit, Haru Nakajima, couldn't walk. He fell over while in the suit and was unable to get up. There was just no way that this version was going to work. A second, much lighter costume was commissioned. They managed to cut the weight down to the next one to only 60 kilos, or about 130 pounds. The first suit was still used, however. It was cut in half, and most notably the bottom portion was used anytime close-ups of Godzilla's feet were needed. But being lighter doesn't mean the suit was downright good. Being inside the newer suit was still an ungodly experience. It would routinely hit 140 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 60 degrees Celsius, and Nakajima could only be in the suit for 3 to 5 minutes before risking passing out. He apparently would sweat out 5 to 10 pounds worth of water every day. It sounds like hell to me, but Nakajima still loved it. He would continue to be the man in the suit for the entirety of the Showa era. The technology would improve pretty drastically over the later movies at least, and by the end of the Showa era, the suit was only a mere 30 kilos or about 65 pounds. A far cry from the initial design, to be sure. Okay, I want to talk about the music and cinematography here, but this is going to be a shorter section because all I have to say is gushing praise. Because these two aspects are really what makes the movie. I've harped on about this movie's tone and atmosphere, how much I love it and how dark it is, and these two things are responsible for like 70% of my love. Let's start with the cinematography. For having never filmed Suit Nation before, the director of cinematography, Masao Tamai, absolutely nailed how to present Godzilla. You have all of the scenes set at ground level looking up at Godzilla from the human perspective, and it really captures the terror and spectacle of a 100-foot-tall monster on a rampage. The dark nighttime scenes were a great choice. The deep shadows and bright flames are a hell of a contrast. And scenes where Godzilla is in the dark being lit by only spotlights are similar, are just atmospheric and rich. The destruction scenes in general, both the scenes showing the miniatures being destroyed and the scenes of the aftermath, are well realized. Not once does the scale ever feel off. You never see a building fall over and think, oh, that's a miniature. It always feels weighty and powerful. The aftermath scenes are also rich, loaded with details that illuminate just how thoroughly Godzilla wrecked the areas he was in. And of course, the scenes with the humans are all shot well too. The drama is always captured, emotions felt, all of that. I'm not going to gush as much about that part though. Toho has filmed humans before making Gojira, so of course they have had practice. Instead, I will gush about the music, because the music for Gojira is iconic. The composer, Akira Ufukube, needs to be given as much credit as anyone else for Godzilla being the juggernaut he became. Because the music for this franchise is some of the best. There are a few tracks Ifukube made for this movie that keep coming back. The most famous of which is The March of Godzilla. You know the one, I'm sure. Here, have a snippet. Yeah, that one. The music makes this movie to me. It's depressing and somber most of the time, heroic when the moment calls for it, but then it's also utterly absent in parts, which is a choice I appreciate. I mean it. I think having the nighttime rampage set mostly without music makes it feel all the more real, makes you feel the horror instead of glamorizing anything. The music is the icing on this movie cake, to me, the final touch that makes the entire dish, or however this cooking metaphor works. Okay, I'll calm down with all of the praise. I liked this movie, yes, but overall, how did everybody else like it? Obviously, it did well, or I wouldn't be sitting here talking about a 35-plus movie franchise, but just how well did it do? Commercially, it was a big success, making triple what it had cost, and the film did cost. I know I talked about how things like the lack of color and the suitmation were done to save budget, so you are probably thinking that this movie was cheap, right? Well, wrong. This movie was a huge investment, costing roughly 5 times what a standard movie Toho was making at the time cost. There was a lot riding on this movie, hence the whole stop-motion consideration to even begin with. But it worked. Gojira brought in more than triple its budget and was one of the highest performing films in Japan that year. So how was it received? Overall, the public liked it, but the critics of the times did not. It was panned for being exploitative of the Lucky Dragon incident. It was panned for being poorly written and acted. And my favorite criticism said that it lacked the soul and tragedy of King Kong. I guess fans liking and critics hating kaiju movies is a tradition as old as the genre itself. I side with the people on this one, because to the average citizen of the time, this movie resonated hard. There's articles reporting people leaving the theater in tears, overwhelmed with emotion and catharsis. The critics called the movie exploitation for being about the very real and very recent nuclear devastation, but the people seemingly felt very differently, and this movie provided a much-needed emotional outlet. And to me personally, I think it's still incredibly evocative and emotionally powerful all these years later. Regardless of what critics said, the movie was a success. Enough so that Toho rushed out a quick sequel, Godzilla Raids Again. And when I say rushed and quick, I mean it. The entire sequel took less than 6 months to make. It shows, but Godzilla Raids Again is a story for the next video. The other thing that the box office success of Gojira had brought was international attention. In 1956, the US decided to release a westernized dub of Gojira called Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Let's talk about it. The dub of Gojira gets its own section here because of just how transformative it was. Later movies, the dubbing is straightforward, with only minor cuts and edits, but for this movie, a lot was cut and a lot was added. The main thing added in by the westernization is an entirely new character, Steve Martin. Martin, played by the iconic Raymond Burr, is a US news reporter who makes a stop in Japan to meet his friend, Dr. Serizawa. They make plans to have lunch, and then Martin decides to explore Tokyo in some capacity. While there, he discovers the news about Godzilla, and being a journalist, he begins reporting on the events until he gets caught up in Godzilla's attack on Tokyo himself. The Steve Martin character isn't a passive insert, not at all. They use some really cool editing and body doubles to put Burr in scenes interacting with other characters like Emiko and Ogata. Sadly, he never does get that lunch with Serizawa. The editing does two things. First, it makes Steve Martin a believable main character. It actually feels like he is there interacting with everyone else. But second, it reduces the other characters somewhat. Serizawa is still realized pretty well, but Emiko feels a bit more passive in the dub, and poor Ogata is basically absent from it. For example, in the dub, it's Martin who convinces Emiko to talk to Serizawa about the oxygen destroyer, not Ogata. Further, the dub cuts pivotal scenes, like Ogata and Yomane disagreeing. This is Ogata erasure, and I find it deplorable. I jest. I actually really like the dub. While the human characters get blunted a bit, the film makes sure to still keep Godzilla as a force of horror and destruction. There's still a lot of the dark scenes I mentioned before, and the scenes shot with Burr are fittingly somber in tone. I really appreciate the respect Raymond Burr brought to the franchise. All Perry Mason here, all Ironside was a great choice, and I'm glad the movie kept the dark horror roots in the westernizing process. Burr held great reverence for Godzilla, and this is not the last time we will be talking about him. Okay, now let's finally talk about the people behind the characters. I left this section to the end mostly so I can address cast from both the original and from the dub. First, we have Akira Takarada playing Ogata. I know I called Ogata a bit plain, but I mentioned Takarada here first because you had better get used to seeing his face. Toho has a penchant for reusing actors and casting them as new characters, and Akira Takarada is the greatest offender of this. He will appear in so many cast sections of my videos. Don't get me wrong, I love this. Takarada is iconic, and Godzilla would not be what it is without him. Next up, we have Akihiko Hirata playing the iconic Dr. Serizawa. He will also be appearing a lot, not as much as Takarada, but still a good amount. Of the characters in Gojira, Serizawa is my favorite, and it's entirely because Hirata does such a good job seeming guilty and haunted. I compared him to Oppenheimer, and I meant it. I wonder how much Nolan enjoys Gojira. Next up, I want to shout out Momoko Koshi, who played Emiko. According to what I can find online, this was her first ever film role, and she absolutely nailed it. I loved her performance here, but I was surprised to see that after she did this, she did not keep taking roles for long. She had 2 other roles in 1955 and 1957, but then she didn't appear again in anything until reprising the role of Emiko in 1995. Nothing bad happened or anything. Kochi just transitioned into a stage career due to not liking the movie side of acting. We also do need to touch again on Raymond Burr as Steve Martin for the westernized version, just because, to me at least, he is on par with the other 3 already mentioned. The dub of Gojira could so easily have been done poorly, and in fact many later dubs are done very poorly. But Burr fits in flawlessly, and I appreciate things like them putting him in the hospital scene directly versus just being a passive talking head, which is something that happens often later. Well, that about sums up my thoughts on the movie. There is a lot I didn't bring up. For example, the fascinating history of how sounds like Godzilla's iconic roar were designed. But I hope I gave you enough meat for a good meal here. This movie still to this day ranks as one of my favorites, if not my absolute favorite. For being the first true kaiju movie and inventing an entire genre with suitmation, this film landed a lot of things perfectly the first try. You can see the DNA from this movie all over. Power Rangers, Pacific Rim, not to mention the other kaiju franchises and companies. Hi Gamera, we'll get to you eventually. This movie formed the foundation of the entire genre. It was the cement upon which the kaiju empire is built. Next time, I will be getting into the sequel, Godzilla Raids Again. Is it any good? Actually, yes, there is a lot there to love. But if you want to hear about it, you'll need to stay tuned. So give this video a like, subscribe so you can see the next episode, comment what you think, and I will see you all next time.